Now, let's get back to talking about the World Championships. And I know you were there for some of this. First round defeats, though, for both of the female players at this year's World Championship. Fallon Sherrock going down 3-1 to Jermaine Watamena, Mikuru Suzuki in straight sets against Pikachu Ricardo Pietreczko. Fallon, of course, pushed the informed Jermaine Watamena, winning the first set and in contest in two of the other three sets, but Mikuru never managed to get going. How do you think they should feel, though, about their games entering 2024?
All right, so separately, we had what I think is just two different scenarios. For Mikuru, I know Meryl, aka at Asian Darts on Twitter, just said she looked tired, and I think for a lot of the kind of flack and banter of the occasional darts fans about international qualifiers, there does need to be a mindfulness of not only have these people traveled in, but also when have they traveled in? It's expensive to travel so far. Jet lag is very real. As you go up in age, it becomes more difficult to be jet lagged. Mikuru and I are not far off in age. I cannot show up anywhere and be functional at all within 72 hours. And Mikuru constantly comes over same day or the day before she appears in tournaments and challenges. And it is a lot to do. And then especially being up third game in the night so that it's just a long, long day and a long, long session. It's exhausting for somebody. I mean, it's exhausting when you sit in the press room, I'll put it that way, to just get into these longer sessions where people are battling back and forth. And even if it's exciting and fun to watch, or if it's a particularly awful one where people fail to get off the mark, it just feels like a long evening. So if you can imagine arriving from another country that's got such a great time difference and being there, I think she got in the day before, and trying to set yourself up and get some rehearsal, well, practice. You can tell I'm an ex-theater kid. Get some practice under your belt and get on the biggest stage in darts with the huge crowd behind you and see straight, let alone throw a dart. It is so impressive. And yeah, she didn't get it going. I think it might be taking a bit of a harder turn on her. I don't think it's indicative of how she should feel about her game. And I think the only reason that game maybe was potential for Mikuru to win, because Pikachu has been in fantastic form throughout the year, was really more around what Pikachu was saying about his experience in the Grand Slam, which is that if he's going to get booed, he's not going to interact with the crowd, he won't be disrespected. And as we know, it's not ideal to post anywhere where the media or social media can get a hold of that you don't like how something happens, you feel disrespected by something. It's better to just kind of, if you have to, put in earplugs to absorb the booze. And just, it is what it is. Especially as a German, I'm sure he's used to that German crowd support. But also be mindful of when you're on the Euro Tour that, the Germans, whoever they're playing, get booed as well. So he's been in such incredible form. I actually didn't expect Mikuru to have a leg to stand on until I realized that he was quite emotionally invested in what the crowd was doing. And then I was like, this might be a slightly more even contest. So for Mikuru specifically, I don't think she needs to worry much about her game going into the year. She just needs to keep with her local events. She may need to contemplate if she needs extra time to come out. I'm sure her sponsors would give her extra time. She is a darting icon throughout Japan and has an incredible game to back it. So it might just be something that she considers coming out sooner for. And she's got a good spirit about it. Now, Fallon, on the other hand, now that's a whole different beast altogether. Fallon obviously pushed Jermaine Waddamena, who had just come back into form. He's had decent form, but he's had a more in-form run lately. And she did push him. I know people absolutely lose their mind when you talk about Fallon or her game, but Fallon brings a lot to big stages, and her game on the floor, for a women's series thing, she might go out in early stages and struggle to be consistent. But as soon as those cameras seem to get on her, she just knows exactly where the treble 20 is and really fights it out to the last. So for her, one of the things I think will frustrate her is I think she'll be frustrated that once again, she's gone out. She's had the opportunity. She's pushed somebody. So she's not folded. She's pushed somebody, but she's not managed to get there. And I don't know how she will particularly assess her own game. If I were to assess her game, I think she needs another treble in her locker. She's always going for the treble 20, which obviously is the one that everybody wants. But I think if she were to practice and have a treble 19 swap like Eileen de Graaf has, she could be unstoppable. Because it's when that first one doesn't go in or the first two don't go in, having an ability to kind of reset yourself somewhere else on the board and get a treble somewhere can help break that up. So I think she has a lot to be proud of because she does find big games when it counts and when it matters. It'll just be super frustrating to her that it's not enough to get her over. So hopefully she's exhibiting or thinking about her own game and how to address the few weaknesses that she's got there. Because if you want to talk about getting consistent scores and always having consistency, it's really hard to practice for consistency. You can practice more so for strengthening your ability and board management. And I think getting another treble in her A game will really increase the likelihood that the next time she's out, she will get past that first round. And if the draw goes her way, I could see her very easily going past second and third round as well, because there's just something about the cameras that brings out the rage in people online and brings out Fallon's best.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned the trebles there, because it actually reminded me of something I meant to say earlier when we were talking about who impressed me, and that was Daryl Gurney. And Daryl Gurney is a player who's historically been similarly known for not wanting to switch, stubbornly at times staying on the triple 20 unless the scoring indicated that he had to change, obviously to leave a finish. But he would just stay on the treble 20, and I don't think I've ever seen Daryl Gurney look as confident and composed as he did in that match against Steve Beaton. And part of that was knowing that he could switch to another treble if he was blocked, and that was not the end of the world. And he chose 18s, not 19s. And maybe that's why he didn't like the switch to 19s. And now he learned, well, maybe I can just switch to 18s. It's a gentler switch. And it made him a much more confident looking player. And it's an interesting point you had made. And maybe Fallon could think of a similar thing. Maybe if she doesn't like the switch all the way down to 19s, how about a switch to 18s instead, like Daryl Gurney started doing? As far as where their games are, you said most everything there is to say. I'm not going to say that much more about Fallon. I think she is playing the best she's played in almost 2 years over the last 6 months. And I think she is continuing getting back to where she was when she was at her best. Still not there yet, but getting closer. And she had chances in that match against Jermaine. As far as Mikuru Suzuki is concerned, those are valid points. And the travel is always something that we just can only speculate unless we hear directly from the player themselves exactly how it affected their game. And it's something Mikuru, though, always has to deal with. And I still will be speculating how it played out in recent women's series. But I do want to point out that since lifting the title of the 17th women's series event, beating Lisa Ashton in that final in at 5 legs to 1. Going a ton plus average in the semifinals against Maria O'Brien. In 17 matches since then in the women's series, she's only managed to eclipse her seasonal average in 6 of them. And one of them was the very last match where she eclipsed it by less than 1/10 of a point, many of them significantly below. Now, part of that is she doesn't always need to play at her best to win, and that's something that makes it difficult to compare. We expect that when she's playing against someone who's going to push her, she's going to up her average, and often she did. She did perform above her season average in 6 of the matches, as I said, and those included matches against Leisha Ashton, Bo Greaves, and Fallon Sherrock. But it only just above her season average, and 2 of those a bit more above it against Bo Greaves. But Bo Greaves beat her 4 legs to 1, and she was barely on a finish in many of those, which makes the average artificially higher than it otherwise would have been. So there is some sign that maybe she is below her best right now, and that raises question marks entering season 2024. And she was obviously below her best in the World Championships against Riccardo Pietreczko. I think there are question marks about her game. I know she's a better player than she appeared in that match. I think she's a better player than she appeared in the last 6 or 7 women's series events of the year. But that doesn't change that there are therefore some question marks. So I'm curious to see how she kicks off the season. I think she'll have every chance to get to the World Championship again next year. There's a clear-cut top, maybe 6 in women's darts, and she is unquestionably one of them. But it's going to be difficult and continue to get more difficult to qualify each year. And if she's playing like she did those last few months throughout much of the next season, then maybe she won't be back at Ali Pali next year, because I don't think that will, in the end, be good enough over a course of a full year to get one of those 2 or 3 spots.